The evening of March 25th, 2017, a charity ball at one of San Francisco's most prestigious hotels gathered the creme de la creme of society: entrepreneurs, artists, and philanthropists. In the grand hall, bathed in the soft glow of chandeliers, live music filled the air as guests exchanged polite pleasantries. Among them was Layla Harper, a young jewelry designer whose creations had already graced the pages of fashion magazines. She had been invited as a promising talent whose success had garnered widespread admiration. Composed and refined, Layla seemed the embodiment of elegance. The fateful encounter occurred at the cocktail table. Edward Grace, a charismatic owner of a luxury restaurant chain, approached Layla with a confident smile. Tall, impeccably poised, and with flawless taste in clothing, he immediately captured her attention. Conversation flowed effortlessly. Edward spoke of his culinary travels, while Layla shared the inspirations behind her jewelry designs. Their connection was undeniable, an electric spark visible even to those around them. Their relationship blossomed rapidly. Within 2 weeks, they embarked on their first trip together to Europe, where Edward showered Layla with lavish gifts: antique earrings from Paris, designer dresses from Milan. Every moment seemed picture perfect. He sent her texts filled with heartfelt compliments, invited her to exclusive dinners at his restaurants, and orchestrated romantic surprises. Yet Layla's friends began to notice subtle warning signs. At a party one evening, Edward appeared irritated when Layla spent too much time chatting with a fellow designer. His gaze grew cold, and though he said nothing, his displeasure was evident. Over time, his jealousy became more pronounced. Layla began to notice how Edward barely concealed his frustration whenever she interacted with other men, even in strictly professional settings. He gently but firmly suggested she limit such interactions, justifying it as concern for her reputation. Despite this, Layla believed in the sincerity of his feelings. She attributed his bouts of jealousy to his deep love and the pressures of his demanding business. In May 2018, surrounded by friends and family, they had a lavish wedding. Floral arches, a live orchestra, the radiant eyes of the newlyweds. Everything was perfect. Immediately after, they left for their honeymoon on the secluded tropical island of La Sirena, where their new blissful life was set to begin. But beneath the surface of this fairy tale lay a shadow that no one yet saw. The island of La Sirena was renowned for its luxurious villas and secluded beaches, attracting couples from all over the world. From the moment Layla and Edward arrived, the resort staff noticed an unusual dynamic between the newlyweds. Edward seemed intent on controlling every aspect of their stay, from the dinner menu to the excursion schedule. He chose Layla's meals without consulting her preferences, dismissing any of her opinions with calm, yet categorically unyielding remarks. On the second day of their honeymoon, the couple went on a sightseeing tour of the island. The guide, Javier, spoke about La Sirena's history and rich culture, punctuating his narrative with stops at scenic spots. According to witnesses, Layla appeared to be engaged, but her attention frequently wandered. She often glanced at Edward, who remained silent and visibly annoyed. When the group stopped at a waterfall for photos, Edward refused to join in. He stood aside, arms crossed, watching Layla pose against the scenic backdrop. His gaze was heavy, and as Javier later noted, the tension between them grew increasingly palpable. That same evening, neighbors in a nearby villa recalled hearing a noise during the night, as if a chair or another heavy object had fallen. The next morning, the couple appeared at breakfast without exchanging a word. Layla seemed tired, her movements slow and restrained. Edward, on the other hand, looked composed and confident. He quickly finished his breakfast and spent the rest of the morning on phone calls. The staff also noticed troubling details. Each morning, housekeeping cleaned their villa, and one day a maid observed marks on the wooden bedroom doorframe, scratches or scuffs that seemed out of place. She thought little of it, assuming it was caused by luggage being moved. Later that evening, the resort hosted a beach party. Layla lingered near the stage for a few minutes, watching the musicians perform. Edward stood off to the side, holding a glass of wine, his eyes fixed on her. Observers noted that after the party, the couple left abruptly. It became increasingly clear that beneath the idyllic facade of their honeymoon lay a growing strain in their relationship. On the third day of their stay on the island, the resort staff noticed a shift in Edward and Layla's behavior. In the morning, Edward arrived at the restaurant alone, surprising the waitstaff, as the couple had always come together before. He quickly ordered, ate breakfast, and returned to the villa without engaging much with the staff. According to the maid, Layla stayed in the room the entire time. She looked pale and subdued, her mood seemingly heavy and downtrodden. Later that day, the couple attended another beach party organized for the resort guests. The atmosphere was lively. Music played, bonfires flickered, and guests danced on the sand. Layla joined a small group near the stage and struck up a brief conversation with one of the musicians. Security camera footage captured Edward, standing off to the side, watching her intently. His expression was tense, and as the video showed, he gripped his glass so tightly that it eventually shattered, spilling wine onto the sand. Witnesses later recalled that Layla returned to Edward visibly uneasy. The footage showed him grabbing her by the elbow and speaking to her rapidly, his lips barely moving. A few minutes later, the couple left the party. The path to their villa wound through lit trails, but none of the guests they passed seemed to notice their tense demeanor. Layla glanced back several times, as if searching for someone, though her gestures went unnoticed. Upon arriving at the villa, the cameras recorded Edward entering first, leaving the door open behind him. A few minutes later, the bedroom lights went out, and silence fell. However, the neighbors in the adjacent villa reported hearing dull thuds, similar to furniture being knocked over. They assumed it was just the result of strong island winds, which often swept through in the evenings. The next morning, Layla did not show up for breakfast, again surprising the staff. Edward explained that she wasn't feeling well and had decided to stay in the room. He appeared composed, though the waitstaff noticed a scratch on his wrist. One of them, the shift supervisor, mentioned it to a colleague, but chose not to escalate the matter to management. The observations and suspicions were beginning to form a troubling picture, but no one dared intervene yet. On the night of the third day of their stay, something strange occurred in Layla and Edward's villa. Neighbors in a nearby villa reported being awakened by a loud noise resembling the crash of a heavy object. The sound repeated several times before briefly subsiding, only to be followed by muffled voices, as if someone was arguing. The crashing waves and rustling wind made it hard to discern the words, but the tension in the sounds was unmistakable, according to witnesses. The next morning, the maid came to the villa for her usual cleaning, but found the door unanswered. After waiting a few moments, Edward emerged from the bedroom. He looked tired and irritable, his eyes red as if from a sleepless night. When the maid asked about Layla's condition, he curtly replied that she wasn't feeling well and had decided to stay in bed. He then requested the cleaning be postponed and quickly shut the door. The maid, however, managed to catch a glimpse of strange marks on the wooden doorframe, small dents and scratches, as though someone had been pushing or forcing against it. She made a mental note of it, but ultimately dismissed the matter, assuming it was accidental. Later, she mentioned it to a colleague who advised her not to worry and focus on her duties. Edward, leaving Layla in the room, went on a boat trip. He took only his sunglasses and wallet, leaving his phone behind. The resort staff noticed that he, usually meticulous about details, appeared distracted. Throughout the trip, he barely interacted with other guests, preferring to stay by himself. His expression was distant, as if he was grappling with something internally. Meanwhile, Layla remained in the villa. As the maid passed by later, she noticed the curtains were tightly drawn and no sound came from inside. This behavior starkly contrasted with the first days of their honeymoon, when Layla often left the windows and doors open to enjoy the ocean view. That evening, Edward returned from his excursion, but did not leave the villa again. He skipped dinner, citing fatigue. For the staff, this marked the final unsettling sign, yet they hesitated to intervene, continuing to observe from a distance. On the morning of June 13th, the maid arrived at Layla and Edward's villa for her daily cleaning. As usual, she knocked on the door, but there was no response. After waiting a few minutes, she decided to enter using a duplicate key. The villa was eerily quiet, with only the faint sound of the ocean breeze filtering through the slightly open balcony door. The living room appeared undisturbed, neatly stacked magazines on the table, empty glasses by the chairs. However, the bathroom door was closed. The maid knocked but received no answer. Hesitantly, she turned the handle and froze. The bathroom was in disarray, and Layla lay on the floor in a robe. Scattered items and signs of a struggle immediately raised alarms. Panicked, The maid screamed, rushed out of the room, and reported the incident to the resort manager. The staff promptly called the police, and local investigators arrived within an hour. Examining the scene, they found numerous signs of violence. Small shards of glass were scattered across the floor, and fingerprints, later identified as Edward's, were found on the bathroom door handle and marble countertop. Unaware of the unfolding investigation, Edward returned to the villa from his morning walk. When he saw police and an ambulance outside, his expression changed. He hurried toward the staff, demanding to know what had happened. There were visible scratches on his wrists, which he attributed to an accidental cut while fishing. However, his behavior was suspicious. He avoided eye contact and appeared visibly nervous. The police immediately detained him for questioning. Edward claimed that he and Layla had spent a quiet evening together before going to bed. Yet discrepancies in his story, coupled with the evidence found at the scene, cast doubt on his version of events. The medical examiner concluded that Layla had died under circumstances suggesting a violent confrontation, though the exact details remained under investigation. This discovery shattered everything. The carefully crafted image of the perfect couple was irrevocably destroyed, exposing the hidden turmoil beneath their seemingly idyllic life. The investigation began immediately after Layla's body was discovered. Upon searching the villa, police found numerous pieces of evidence that contradicted Edward's account. His fingerprints were found on the marble sink, the broken shards of a mirror, and the bathroom door handle. The blood on the floor was confirmed to belong to Layla. Police closely examined the resort's security footage. In a video recorded the previous evening, Layla was seen talking to one of the musicians at the beach party. Edward, standing off to the side, was clearly watching her. The footage then showed Edward grabbing Layla roughly by the elbow and leading her away. Shortly afterward, the couple was seen leaving the party. Witnesses noted that Edward appeared irritated, while Layla seemed visibly distressed. Neighbors in the villa next door reported hearing loud noises during the night, similar to furniture being overturned. These testimonies, combined with physical evidence, painted a coherent picture of escalating tension. Police also uncovered that just days before the tragedy, Layla had visited the hotel shop and inquired about contacting a local doctor, suggesting she might have been experiencing distress she wasn't willing to disclose openly. The medical examiner's report indicated a critical incident, and the circumstances of Layla's death pointed to severe tension in their relationship. The collected evidence allowed investigators to piece together the sequence of events, shedding light on the hidden issues that had preceded the tragedy. Edward, under increasing pressure from the mounting evidence, denied any involvement. He claimed that Layla's death was a tragic accident, insisting she had slipped in the bathroom and struck her head on the sink. However, investigators noted that his story kept changing. He could not explain why there were clear signs of a struggle or why his fingerprints were found on the broken mirror. The investigation also revealed that Edward had shown increasing signs of jealousy in recent months, as confirmed by Layla's acquaintances. These outbursts of irritation and controlling behavior created a tense atmosphere in their relationship. The shocking evidence gathered by the police shattered the public image of a caring husband, revealing the hidden danger that had led to the tragedy. The trial began exactly 1 year after the tragic events on La Serena Island. The case of Layla Harper and Edward Grace drew widespread public attention, with major media outlets covering the proceedings. The courtroom was filled with reporters, Layla's friends, and her family, all eager to uncover the truth behind that fateful night. Edward appeared in court wearing a formal suit, his face tense, his gaze often avoiding the crowd. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence. First, they showed security footage depicting Edward's controlling and aggressive behavior toward Layla. Next, witnesses, including resort staff and neighbors, testified that they had heard sounds of a struggle on the night before Layla's death. Expert testimony played a pivotal role, with forensic reports confirming signs of physical conflict, forming a crucial part of the case against Edward. The defense team argued that Layla's death was a tragic accident. They claimed Edward had been under immense emotional strain due to work and marital tension. However, their arguments paled in comparison to the overwhelming evidence. The prosecution highlighted the scratches on Edward's wrists, his inconsistent statements, and his clear attempts to conceal signs of a struggle. A turning point came with the testimony of a psychologist who revealed that Layla had expressed concerns about the increasingly strained dynamics in her relationship, which had caused her significant anxiety. These details painted a convincing picture of the hidden tensions that could have led to the tragedy. After weeks of deliberations, the jury reached a verdict without delay. Edward Grace was found guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the judge announced the decision, the courtroom fell into heavy silence. Layla's family embraced, and her friends wept quietly, feeling a sense of justice. Edward showed no emotion as the sentence was read. His lawyer filed an appeal, but the chances of its success were slim. The trial marked the culmination of a tragic story that destroyed two lives and served as a grim reminder of the importance of trust and mutual respect in our relationships. The story of Layla Harper and Edward Grace shocked everyone who knew them. Behind the facade of a perfect marriage lay a dynamic of control, jealousy, and inner turmoil that ultimately led to tragedy. Following the verdict, the case sparked widespread public discussion, raising important questions about domestic abuse and psychological coercion in relationships. Layla was remembered as a talented jewelry designer whose creations stood out for their elegance and uniqueness. Her friends described her as a kind and compassionate person who always made time for her loved ones despite her busy schedule. Devastated by her loss, her family dedicated themselves to advocating for the rights of domestic abuse victims. They established a charitable foundation in her memory, offering legal aid, shelter, and psychological support to women trapped in toxic relationships. The villa on La Serena, where the tragedy took place, remained unoccupied for a long time. Resort staff, who previously noticed nothing suspicious in Edward's behavior, expressed deep regret. Many underwent psychological training to better recognize signs of troubled relationships among guests. The resort management implemented new measures, including anonymous hotlines for those who might be in danger. Meanwhile, Edward Grace, now serving his sentence, saw his once popular restaurants gradually lose clientele before being sold to new ownership. Those who had worked with him described him as a demanding yet professional individual, none of whom could have imagined he was capable of violence. The public continued to discuss the case. Journalists, experts, and activists held debates, striving to understand the root causes of such behavior. Layla's story inspired the production of a documentary that explored her life and her relationship with Edward in detail. The film evoked a powerful response, drawing attention to the issue of hidden abuse. Exhibitions held in Layla's honor showcased her work alongside pieces inspired by her story. Her loved ones hoped that the tragedy would not be forgotten and that it would serve as a warning to others. Layla remained in people's memories as a woman whose art and life became symbols of the fight for freedom and the right to personal happiness. This case not only changed the lives of those directly involved, but also influenced broader societal conversations, serving as a reminder of the importance of recognizing hidden threats in relationships.